All righty. Well, my name's Kathy Nicholson, and I have been with Avel eCare for about 12 years. And I work closely with Sheila on the school health program as their account executive. But just a little bit about eCare. We've been around doing telemedicine for almost 30 years, since 1993. And we're based out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And we are in what we call is our hub, but it's actually a virtual hospitals. So inside our building, we have services, emergency, pharmacy, ICU, behavioral health, hospitalists, senior care, and others. But school health is embedded. And school health and Sheila's team is embedded right in the middle of the other service lines.
Very good. And so my name is Sheila Freed, and I'm the director of the program. And I've been a school nurse for about 20 years. I was started out in a pretty rural district in South Dakota. It was in Sturgis, South Dakota. So I think motorcycles, that's what's happening there right now. And I drove about 100 miles a day to take care of all the different tasks that I need to take care of with my students. Then we moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is the largest attendance center in our state, about 25,000 kids. And I was a building nurse and then the supervisor, and we still struggled to, I had pretty good nursery coverage, but I still struggled because they did have to share buildings and we could never be in the right building at the right time. Moved on to North Dakota, worked public health in North Dakota, and then I've been back in this position for about 6 years. So the program itself grew out of a need. And so the need was there was a gap. There was a gap in coverage. And we all believe that a school nurse on site every day in every building is the best model. But sometimes that isn't a model that we can achieve. And so when the school district came to the technology hospital, Avel eCare, and said, can you help us? A pilot was born, and that was in 2015. And so the nurse in the hub, like Kathy said, started serving those schools when their building nurse was not in the building. And then it moved on to a time where we received a HRSA grant, and that's when we were able to move out beyond the city of Sioux Falls. And so we started serving our rural schools who had no school nurse. We started serving schools where, again, they had maybe one nurse or two nurses, but they didn't have enough coverage. And so we're up to today, we serve about 90 schools, and in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Nebraska, Maine, and then we will start in Montana. And so we do both, like the extender program where we help the nurses that are in the buildings. So we have Minot, North Dakota, we're in all 19 of their buildings. And they have 5 on-site nurses. And so the nurses are paired with one of our nurses, and they together develop how we can help. Other schools, we have a couple of schools in Minnesota that have struggled to find a nurse. And so actually one in Minnesota, one in Maine, a couple in South Dakota. And so we help fill in that gap where we are the primary nurse, where we meet with the parents, we do the care plans, we do the education for staff. We kind of help fulfill that role to fill in the gap. And so the first thing we're going to do today, what we're going to do next is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to show you what a video visit looks like. So hold on a second. And then we'll ask for questions at the end. So can you see Kathy holding up some equipment? I'm assuming it's a yes.
I cannot. I just see the screen like the Brady Bunch.
Okay, let me try and share again. Let me try it again here.
That worked. It just looked like Kathy was on mute, but everything else looked right.
Okay. You can see Kathy now? All right, Kathy, can you unmute yourself on Teams, and then we'll be able to get started.
we go.
Okay, very good. So this is what you're seeing right now with Kathy is what you're seeing is the nurse view. And so what Kathy is a school view. So what she's showing you is our Title Care equipment. So there's the camera, and then there is an otoscope, a stethoscope, something to look at the throat with, and then there's the derm cam. And so when we come on, what the school gets then is an iPad. And so they push the button and we come and do the training for all this. And then we start the visit. So we're going to do a pretend visit for you today. So I'll say, hi, my name is Nurse Sheila. How can I help you today?
Hi, Sheila. My name is Kathy, and my throat is sore today, and my ear hurts. I just don't feel good.
I'm sorry to hear that. So the next thing that we do is we look into the student information program, unless it's a chronic care kid that we know well, like for our kids with type 1 diabetes or with seizures, you know, things like that, who we would know. But we look into the student information system. We serve a variety. We have everything from Skyward to Power School, the Infinite Campus, EduTech. We have quite a synergy. We have quite a number that we serve, but we look into it so that we can make sure whether or not the student has any health information that we need to know before we start our visit, if there's anything unusual that we need to be aware of. And then we're primary nurses, so most of the time the nurses will have an idea about their student. So I'm going to say, well, we're going to start with taking your temperature. And so it would be, usually it's an intersector of whoever takes care of the kids when the nurse is out of the building, or if there's not a nurse, whoever takes care of the kids. And then we run the visit. So really the assistants, usually which are secretaries, paraprofessionals, depending, they are our hands. Well, good news, Kathy. So far, you don't have a temperature. So we're gonna be able to stay in school. So then let's take a look in your throat. So the equipment is blue dot to blue dot. And then we're gonna look in the throat. So you can see what we see. And just like your school nurses, we don't ever diagnose, but we just help give the parents a little bit more information so they could make the best decision about their student. All right, let's take a look in your ears. So far, your throat looks good. And there are throat paddles or tongue depressors that go on. Again, blue dot to blue dot. And then I turn on the otoscope. There we go. And so then we can look at that eardrum and give that parent, again, that best information. So is it red? Is it they're complaining of pain, but it really isn't red? They don't have a fever. We can give them something for comfort, you know, just giving them the right information they need. The next thing we're going to look at is the skin. So as we know, rashes are very prevalent. So this helps us look at rashes. We can look at hair. Now I know Minnesota students never get lice, but just in case they would, we can help identify. So then we can help do that calls to the family just to let them know. We know that most schools we don't send home for lice, but we do let the families know. And then the other way we can use this light, and we're not going to show you that right now, but is to check pupils if a kid gets a head bump. Then the last thing that we're going to show you here is a stethoscope. So it's an amplified stethoscope. And unfortunately, because we're going between multiple platforms, really, we can't let you hear. It goes right through the clothing. If they have like a lot of times our big kids would have a sweatshirt on, or sometimes our young kids too. But if they have a shirt underneath it, we have them take off the sweatshirt. Otherwise, we can hear through. Well, let's say we want to listen to the lungs. So we can show the staff where we want them to move the stethoscope. And we won't make Kathy be a octopus, but it looks there. So then once we're done with our visit, and we don't use every piece, those are called peripherals. We don't use every piece every visit because it really just depends on what's needed with the student. Afterwards, we then visit a little bit with the student, because really what we're doing is we're trying to teach kids to be their own health consumers and little itty bits at a time. And so we'll say, well, this is what I think our plan should be. An example is I had seen a kid that had hurt his knee, and I said, this is what I think we should do. I think we should just put ice on it. You have good motion, but I'll call your mom and let her know. What do you think about that plan? And the student said, I don't like that plan. I was like, oh, okay, well, what would you like to do? And he said, my mom is really busy. I can tell my mom when I get home. So I was like, okay, but that was good. We were doing a health consumer. But many times we'll say, who's the best person, the best adult to call in your household? Sometimes school staff will know that. They'll let us know. And then we end the visit and we make the call to the parent. After the call is made, the plan's set up, then we call back to the school, let them know what the plan is, and then we document into whatever the student information system is. And so before we get out of the visit, is there any question about the equipment, or do you want to see something else more? All right.
I have one quick question. Do you have sort of a price sheet as you're looking at, as we're considering whether to access services? Is there a general summary sheet that's available that says this is what each, the equipment would cost?
Yeah, so we do. And so we are going to talk about that next, kind of like what that process looks like. All right. So Kathy, why don't you talk a little bit about the grant and process?
Sure. So Avel was very fortunate a couple of years ago now, maybe a year and a half ago, we were the recipient of some grant funding from the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation and the Helmsley Charitable Trust. What that does is it gives grant funding to schools that have at least one type 1 diabetic student that would be willing, or the family would be willing to partake in the research study. And if you qualify, if you're eligible, the program will pay for 90% of the cost of the program the first year, 60% the second year, and if we get the extension for the third year, which we really are hopeful, it would be 30% the third year. As far as the proposal goes, it's based on student enrollment. So the cost would be based on your student enrollment, and whether or not part of the equation is whether it's a primary nurse model or the extender nurse model. But the next steps after, if we do have a school that's interested, they would reach out to me, and I would get that information as far as whether or not there's a nurse on site, even part-time, that would create the care plan. Then I would do the extender model. If there is no nurse at all, we would take the primary nurse duties. Then I would price it as a primary nurse, again, based on enrollment. Did that answer your question, Erin? Okay.
So really, the next steps are, if people are interested, are to reach out to Kathy. And Kathy, would you mind putting your email address into the chat?
Yeah.
And what other questions do you have now?
Well, I know that I am definitely, Kathy, want to talk to you today if possible. We are a very small organization, cannot justify a full FTE of school nurse, but aren't able to access that service from our member districts. And so I definitely need something ASAP. So even if it works to stay on the call,
yeah,
I could maybe just visit versus trying to set up another time.
Sure.
Absolutely. And I did put my email address in the chat, Erin. If you want to, you sure can email me what the information that I would need to create the proposal would be, whether or not you have a nurse on site, whether it be primary or extender, and then the student enrollment number.
And we can stay on the call too afterwards as well, just to get some of that information.
Yes, and I can get that created pretty quickly for you, so you'll get that back. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet.
And it is true that, we have different models really that we use. So sometimes we help with in those larger school districts where they just need, in Sioux Falls, we serve 6 buildings. and they have 33 buildings. And then in like Minot, where we are in all 19 buildings, it allows the nurses more flexibility. So it looks a little different places versus some of our small schools where they don't have a nurse and they can pay for a piece of the nurse. And this is what this does also. Also, we're all Minnesota licensed. That's an important piece that you need to know. We're all licensed school nurses. And so we have that top tier. Because we think that's important. Most of us have some sort of a pediatric specialty licensure. Two of us are certified school nurses. Two of us are pediatric specialist nurses. I don't think that's quite right, but it's really what we do. And one of the things that we enjoy is that even though we remote in, we have support here at the hub. So if we're having an emergency situation in your school, we might have one nurse staying on with your camera and the kid and another nurse calling the families, so it helps to extend the resources that are available to the school. And then the school staff and the kids really get relationship with our staff. We try to keep the same nurses, like I said, with the same building so that they develop relationship. In fact, one of our kids this summer baked cookies and sent it to his nurse because he is missing his nurse. Kind of funny. So we intersect with quite a few type 1 kids. And so type 1 diabetes, right now, we probably have around 40 that we serve. I have a staff of about 10. And we serve 3 different time zones. Other questions?
I just popped in the chat there. I'm wondering how mental health and your special education stuff works. The 504s, the EAPs, things like that.
Yeah. So we have kind of a cart that we're on. And so when we have SPED meetings, 504 meetings, they just roll us right up to the table. It's kind of funny, but we participate like that. And so in our small schools where we don't share them with a on-site nurse, we help write the 504s as needed and to help with that. Like I said, we write the care plans so that are inform, those special ed decisions. Do reach out to the families. As far as mental health, we have our school nurse service, and then we have another service that we have for the schools. So school nurse is a passive consent. And so it's just like if you have a building nurse, parents don't sign a consent to see the building nurse. They are just able to see the building nurse. There's just a notification process. We have this program, blah, blah, blah. So parents can actively opt out, but they passively opt in. The behavioral health service is a consented program. And so we have MSWs who are licensed therapists, and then they can see the kids on camera. So we see 5th through 12th graders. So if you have to have nursing service first, either Avel or you have to have an on-site nurse. We want that whole child model. So we don't want just a therapist and no nurse. That doesn't work. And so if you have nursing services, then the therapy can come in. It's $80 per visit. We usually do 5th to 12th grade. And then it's not for your chronically mentally ill kids, but it's really for those kids that are having episodic problems, anxiety, depression, resiliency issues, school, like they don't want to come to school. There's a term for that. I can't think of it right this second.
School refusal.
Pardon?
School refusal.
Thank you. That's it. So those kind of things, that's where we really help.
Do you help? So that kid that comes in that's having a tough time that needs a referral, something to deal with more chronic issues. Do you guys help with the referrals on that and connecting that, or do you just kind of send it out, send it to the nurse, send it, you know, hey, this student needs something. And in the $80, is that
per visit.
per
So
visit,
that's
no
their,
insurance accepted type of deal? Parents are gonna
correct.
ask that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just, that's it.
So the school would have to pay for that. So like
Okay.
we only have 4 schools that do the behavioral health services because of that, because we don't
Yeah,
bill
cost is an issue, I'm sure.
providers, and so they cover it with a grant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how that works. So let's say that, but let's go back to the nursing services.
Yeah,
Let's say we have
sorry.
that's okay. I understand. So let's say we have a kid that comes in and, you know, we do an assessment. They say that they have chest pain. And so we do an assessment and we're like, you know, everything looks great. So can you tell me, is there something else going on? So at this point in time, we're thinking we're dealing more with anxiety than we're dealing with a true physical ailment. And so, you know, we'll ask a few questions so that we have some guidance where we need to go next. And so then after, you know, if it's something that, you know, is emergent, so there's suicidality involved, then, you know, we're going to keep the kid on camera and we're going to have one of the other nurses call the school staff and say, we need some assistance here. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll get off camera and then we'll talk to the counselor and say, this is how our visit went. Really kind of just like what you would do in a building. This is how the visit went. This kid needs to be followed up on. You know, if it's a middle schooler or a high schooler and we feel like we could have better conversation without the school staff there, we'll ask the school staff to step out and make sure we're in a private area so we can talk about whatever is going on and see if possible to get a little bit further to the bottom.